A pregnant woman walks out of her home in a postal worker uniform. She's 26 years old. She has a steady job. She's expecting her first baby, and from the outside it looks like she's simply leaving for work. But there is one problem. She had already called in sick. That detail alone makes this case feel wrong from the very beginning. Because on October 2nd, 2018, Kierra Coles did not just miss work shift. She vanished. And for years, the mystery has stayed almost frozen in place. There was surveillance video. There was an ATM stop. There was her car. There were a man police called a person of interest. There were thousands of tips. There was a grieving family begging for answers. But there was no arrest, no public suspects, no final explanation, and no Kierra. This is not just the story of a missing woman. It is the story of a mother who never got to hold her baby. A family stuck in the same day forever, and a case where the camera saw pieces of the truth, but not enough to bring her home. This is the disappearance of Kierra Coles. Before Kierra became a missing person poster, before her name became a headline, before strangers started studying the last images of her life, she was simply Kierra. Kierra Coles was a young woman from Chicago. She worked for the United States Postal Service as a letter carrier. People close to her described her as full of life. She loved makeup, she loved taking pictures, she loved dancing, and she loved her job. She was the kind of person her mother expected to hear from every day. That mattered in this case, because when someone lives a private life, it can be hard to know when silence becomes dangerous. But with Kierra, her silence was not normal. Her mother knew her routine. Her family knew her habits. And when Kierra stopped answering, it was not treated like a small delay. It felt wrong. At the time she disappeared, Kierra was pregnant. She was around 3 months along. This was supposed to be the beginning of a new chapter. A first child, a future, a reason to plan, a reason to dream. But instead of baby clothes, doctor visits, and family celebration, her loved ones were forced into searches, flyers, police updates, and unanswered questions. And that is what makes this case so painful. Kierra did not disappear from a remote highway. She did not vanish while traveling far from home. She disappeared from her own neighborhood, from a normal day, from the middle of a city filled with cameras, cars, people, and witnesses. And still, she was gone. October 2nd, 2018 began with a strange contradiction. Kierra called in sick to work, but later, surveillance footage showed her outside in her postal worker uniform. That is the first crack in the timeline. Why would someone call in sick, then put on the uniform anyway? Was she planning to go somewhere else? Was she meeting someone? Was she trying to keep up an appearance? Or was something already happening behind the scene that nobody outside her apartment could see? Police later said that on that day, Kierra entered her residence in the 8100 block of South Vernon Avenue. Then a man arrived. Investigators would later identify that man as a person of interest. That phrase is important. Person of interest does not mean guilty. It means police believe he had information that mattered. It means he was connected to the timeline. It means his movement raised questions. According to police, Kierra and this man later got into her car. Kierra was in driver's seat. They drove away. At that moment, to a camera or a witness, it may not have looked like anything dramatic, just two people leaving in a car. But in a missing person cases, the ordinary details often become the most haunting one. Because later, when everyone looks back, they realize they were watching the beginning of the final known timeline. A car pulling away, a woman still alive, a person beside her, and nobody knowing that this would become one of Chicago's most disturbing missing person cases. Later that night, Kierra appeared on a surveillance video again. This time she was at an ATM. Police said she was seen making 2 withdrawals at a business in the 8600 block of South Cottage Grove. It was late at night. She entered, she used the machine, she left a few minutes later. And according to police, those were the last recorded images of Kierra Coles. That sentence is heavy, the last recorded images. Not the last phone call, not the last confirmed conversation, not the last family visit. A camera, an ATM, a few minutes, a woman carrying her future inside her, and then nothing. This is the part of the story where viewers should pause and ask the same question. Investigators has to ask, was Kierra acting normally? Was she alone? Was she under pressure? Did she withdraw that money for herself, or did someone else want it? The public does not have every detail. Police have not released everything they know. But the ATM moments matter because it proves Kierra was alive that night. It gives the timeline a fixed point. It tells us she was still moving through the city, still visible, still close enough to cameras to be tracked. And yet, after that moment, the case falls into darkness. Less than an hour later, Kierra's vehicle was seen arriving and parking in another area of Chicago. But what happened next made the mystery even worse. Police said the person of interest exited from the passenger side. Nobody exited from the driver's side. Think about that carefully. Kierra had early been driving. Now her car appears somewhere else. A man gets out, but the driver's side shows no one getting out. So where was Kierra? Was she still inside? Had she already been moved? Was she no longer in control of the vehicle? That is one of the biggest questions in the entire case, because the camera did not show everything. It showed just enough to make the silence terrifying. The next day added another strange piece. Police said the person of interest was seen parking Kierra's vehicle near her home. Then he entered her building. Then he left with unknown items. Those items have never been publicly identified. That leaves another gap. What was taken? Clothes, documents, personal belongings, something connected to Kierra, something that could explain what happened. The public does not know. But investigators clearly cared about that movement, because by releasing that detail years later, police were telling the public this was not just a simple missing person timeline. This was a chain of behavior. Kierra calls in sick. Kierra is seen in uniform. A man arrives. They leave together. She used an ATM. Her car appears elsewhere. The man exits, but no one exits from the driver's side. The next day, he returned to her home. He leaves with unknown items. Then Kierra is never seen again. That is not a clean disappearance. That is a puzzle. And every piece points to the same painful truth. Something happened after the ATM. Something serious enough that a pregnant woman vanished from her life completely. Kierra's mother, Karen Phillips, was used to hearing from her daughter. They had a close routine, so when Kierra went silent, Karen felt the alarm immediately. This was not normal. This was not Kierra taking space. This was not a young woman simply forgetting to call. Her phone stayed silent. Her family could not reach her, and soon the search began. When police checked Kierra's apartment, reports said some important personal items were still there. That detail matters because people who leave by choice usually take the things they need to survive. Phone, purse, keys, money, personal items. But Kierra's life did not look packed up. It looked interrupted. Her family searched. They passed out flyers. They asked questions. They hoped someone saw something. And because Kierra worked for the postal service, her case carried another layer. She was not only a daughter, not only a pregnant woman, she was also a federal employee. a letter carrier, someone whose job was built around daily routine, schedules, and public trust. The U.S. Postal Inspection Service became involved. The official reward notice asked for information leading to Kierra's location. But even with police, postal inspectors, community member, and family pressure, Kierra remained missing. And every day that passed made the case harder. Because the first hour in a missing person case are everything. The first day, the first witness, the first camera, the first search, the first wrong turn. And in Kierra's case, the timeline was already complicated from the start. The phrase person of interest can become dangerous online. People hear it and immediately think they know the ending. But in real case, we have to be careful. Police identified the man as a person of interest. That means investigators believe he had important information. It does not mean the public has enough evidence to call him guilty. What we know from police is about movement. He arrived at Kierra's residence. He entered. He later left with Kierra in her car. He was connected to the ATM timeline. He was seen after Kierra was last recorded. He was seen returning to her building the next day. And police said there were inconsistent statements connected to the case. That is why this man mattered. Not because the internet needs a villain, but because the timeline does not make sense without explaining his actions. Why was he there? Why did he and Kierra go? What happened after the ATM? Why did nobody appear to exit the driver's side when the car parked later? Why return to her building the next day? What items were removed? And why has no arrest been made? These are the questions that keep the case alive. They are also the questions that make it frustrating, because when the public sees the timeline this suspicious, people expect a quick conclusion. But real investigation need evidence strong enough to survive court. A bad theory is not enough. A suspicious video is not always enough. A person acting strangely is not always enough. Police need proof. And in Kierra's case, the proof needed to bring charges has not been publicly shown. That is the gap between suspicion and justice. And Kierra's family has been living inside that gap for years. At first, Kierra's disappearance received attention. A pregnant postal worker missing from Chicago. Surveillance footage, a possible person of interest, a family searching. It had every element that usually keeps a case in the news, but over time the attention faded. That is one of the hardest truths about missing person cases. The family never moves on, but the public does. News cycle shifts, new cases appear, old headlines disappear, search posts stop being shared. And eventually a case that once felt urgent becomes a name only loved one keeps repeating. That happened here. Kierra's family kept speaking. They kept asking for help. They kept marking birthdays, anniversaries, and painful dates. But national attention never stayed where it should have. And that is part of the reason this case is underserved. Because Kierra's story is not missing drama. It is not missing facts. It is not missing emotional weight. It is missing sustained public pressure. It is missing the kind of deep coverage that keeps people asking questions. It is missing the kind of attention that makes one person with information finally decide to talk. Someone knows something. That sentence appears in almost every missing person case, but here it feels especially true. Because Kierra did not vanish into thin air. She was seen. Her car was seen. A man was seen. Her building was seen. The ATM was seen. The timeline has witnesses made of glass and metal. Cameras that captured pieces. But somewhere between those pieces, the truth disappeared. There is another angle in this case that deserves more attention. Kierra was a postal worker. That means she was a part of a large institution with its own law enforcement branch, the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. Postal inspector investigators crime connected to the mail, postal employees, postal facilities, and postal operations. In Kierra's case, the Postal Inspection Service issued a wanted notice and offered the reward for information. That matters, but it is also raises a bigger question. When one of their own disappearance, how much pressure can an institution apply? How many resources can be used? How long can that pressure last? And what happened when the story fades from the public eye? This is not about blaming the Postal Service. The record shows postal inspectors were involved. The question is deeper than that. It is about how missing workers are treated after the first wave of attention. And Kierra had a federal job. She had co-workers, she had routines, she had a workplace community. And still, years later, her family is asking for answers. That is why this case should not be treated as only a family tragedy. It is also a workplace disappearance. A public service employee vanished. A pregnant letter carrier disappears from the city she served, and the people who loved her are still waiting for the system to produce an answer. That angle is powerful because it asks viewers to think about beyond the crime itself, not just what happened to Kierra, but also what did every institution do after she disappeared, and was it enough? Let's slow the case down, because in a mystery like this, it is easy to get lost in emotion. Here is what we know. Kierra Coles disappeared on October 2nd, 2018. She was 26 years old. She was pregnant. She works as USPS letter carrier. She was seen on surveillance footage in her postal uniform, even though she had called in sick. A man later, identified by police as a person of interest, entered her residence. Kierra and the man later left in her vehicle. Kierra was later seen making ATM withdrawals. Those ATM images are the last recorded images of her. Less than an hour later, her vehicle was seen parking in another part of the city. The person of interest exit the passenger side. Police said nobody exited the driver's side. The next day, the person of interest was seen parking Kierra's vehicle near her home, entering her building and leaving with unknown items. Kierra has not been found. No arrest has been made. The reward has grown over time. Her family is still searching. That is the known skeleton of the case. But the missing parts are where the pain lives. What happened after the ATM? Where was Kierra when her car parked later that night? What was removed from her home? Why did she call in sick but appear in uniform? Did she expect to come back? Did she know she was in danger? And did someone close to her know more than they have said? Those questions are why the case still matters. Every unsolved case creates theories. Some people think Kierra was harmed by someone she knew. Some focus on the person of interest. Some focus on the pregnancy. Some ask whether there were relationship tensions. Some wonder whether the ATM withdrawals were forced. Some ask whether the sick call was made by Kierra herself, or whether there is more to that part of the timeline. But here is where we have to be honest. A theory is not evidence, and Kierra's story should not be turned into gossip. She was a real woman. Her baby was real. Her family's pain is real. So the responsible way to look at this case is to separate what is confirmed from what is only a question. Confirmed she vanished. Confirmed she was pregnant. Confirmed police released surveillance details. Confirmed person of interest was seen in key parts of the timeline. Confirmed no arrest has been made. Not confirmed exactly what happened to her. Not confirmed whether the person of interest harmed her. Not confirmed where she was taken. Not confirmed what items were removed from her home. Not confirmed who, if anyone, planned her disappearance. That line matters because justice does not come from guessing. Justice comes from proof. And if someone watching knew something, even a small detail, that information could matter. A car seen at the wrong time, a conversation someone dismissed, a story that changed, a person who come home with items they could not explain, a comment made years ago. A small memory can become important when investigators place it next to the timeline. That is why cold cases can still move, not because time helps, but because people change, relationship breaks, loyalties fade, secrets become heavier, and sometimes after years of silence, someone finally speaks. For Kierra's family, time has not healed this. It has only made the absence bigger. Her mother has had to live through birthdays without her, holidays without her, the due date of Kierra baby without her answers. Every year brings another anniversary, another press conference, another plea, another reminder that the world can forget a case while the family is still trapped inside it. Imagine being a mother and not knowing wherever your daughter was scared, not knowing whether she suffered, not knowing where she is, not knowing what happened to the grandchild you were waiting to meet. Kierra Coles' case needs attention because it has all the signs of solvable mystery. There is video, there is timeline, there is a car, there is person of interest, there are investigators who clearly know more than the public. There is a reward. But the piece have not yet become a courtroom answer, and that is why public attention matters. What happened to Kierra Coles after the ATM? Where was she when her car parked less than an hour later? And why has a pregnant postal worker been missing for years with no arrests? Kierra's family is still waiting. Chicago is still holding this secret. And until the truth comes out, her story is not over. If you knew anything about the disappearance of Kierra Coles, contact the U.S. Postal Inspection Service or Chicago Police. Even one small detail could help bring answers to her family. Thank you.